Cool. In that case, it looks like we have a top one over here, which had 4. We've got a 3, and then we've got a bunch of 2s that I'm just going to put next to each other, and then depending on how they go, we'll maybe run through those in order or just in whatever seems relevant, because I can just make it up as I go along because I'm in charge. Haha. Cool. So first one that we had on there is how does a PSM3 holder, and I suppose for the purposes of Marcelo there, we should maybe also extend that to CSPSM holders. So how do those high-level certifications potentially help us in the job market? What do you all, or Marcelo, would you like to jump in first on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. The way that I would apply the understanding of that, and I'll go on the record saying this, perhaps our certifying bodies could do a better job of helping folks understand what their relevance and what they actually bring to benefit to the person, is the fact that those are, one, not simple to acquire, B, both require practical experience to acquire. So in other words, they in of themselves are a demonstration of your being able and have been able to apply Scrum in practice. Okay, first and foremost, because of the way the learning journey is for these, okay, I would go as so far as to say is that, look, if you're looking for someone who is necessary to do some agile coaching, you're going to do worse by not picking a PSM3 or CSPSM, because both of those credentials, by definition, include in how they are built up to coaching capabilities. Okay. You're not just that entry level Scrum Master who's saying, hey, look, we need to put together a daily Scrum, we need to put together a working agreement. You're actually applying these things in practice and inspecting and adapting them. Okay, quite often you're dealing with more than just one team, so now you're involved in some sort of systemic level coaching. Okay, you're helping the organization, for example, plan out things. Okay, to all of a sudden you've been working as a Scrum Master for a team, and they come to you on a Friday and say, by the way, we need to start putting together a plan for us to be able to put together 2 other teams. Go. Okay, and so you've acquired the sorts of skills to know how to synthesize these sorts of problems and coach the organization in doing these sorts of things. So in a sense, okay, a PSM3 or a CSPSM, okay, have some coaching cred with them.
Yeah. I have a quick question. We know from like in Scrum.org, very few people go from PSM1 to PSM2, and then even fewer from PSM2 to 3. Is it the same pattern with the Scrum Alliance CSM qualifications?
Yes, in a nutshell. Yeah, I don't know the percentages off the top of my head, but yes.
On that note, though, what I will throw in, because for one of my talks that I'm going to be doing actually next week at Agile Manchester, I have been copying the numbers down, and PSM1 to PSM2 is 0.6% of practitioners go from 1 to 2, and the number that go to PSM3 is 0.01% of practitioners. So if nothing else, there is a like exclusivity bias here, right? Which is the number of people that have these things is so small that you put yourself in potentially quite an exclusive club. But I think the thing that's more important, like Marcelo said, is the actual practical skill that it checks for and therefore kind of asserts that you have. So, sorry, Saruchi, go ahead.
So, Marcelo, CSPSM is equivalent to PSM3, correct?
Yes.
So, can you share a little bit about the overall exam format? Because PSM3 is definitely challenging. I mean, that the overall time box for question, and that is difficult. Can you share a little bit more about?
There is no oral exam. There is no written exam. We as the trainers are the exam. And the reason why is because one of the key differentials between the Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org is that each trainer develops their own material according to a set of learning objectives which were developed by a cohort of folks from the Scrum Alliance, including trainers themselves. So in other words, regardless of what material I as a CST put together, it is assessed by folks within the Scrum Alliance for educational structure. In other words, we follow the Bloom's taxonomy, so we have to adhere the material that we put together, the exercises that are put forward for us to facilitate the learner's journey, okay, for adhering to this Bloom's taxonomy, because as you progress, obviously from CSM upwards, okay, the level of understanding and application on the part of the learner must be more synthetic. In other words, you must be synthesizing more, not just understanding more. Okay, so when we submit our materials, they are assessed for that, as well as, okay, how well they convey back to the learners the learning objectives themselves. Okay, and sometimes some folks have their materials. I was very lucky. Our materials were passed on the first try, but sometimes you'll get sent back with feedback to improve the material. Okay. And anytime the learning objectives change, i.e., when the Scrum Guide changes, we have to resubmit materials to adhere to whatever that revision of the Scrum Guide at the time is. Okay. And so effectively, the fact that in the class, or a cohort, if you will, because I don't teach it as a 2-day class for the CSPSM, you're amassing, okay, effectively a portfolio of the things that you are doing to demonstrate that you can plan a thing like what I described a couple of minutes ago. You're working in a Scrum team, and now you have to prepare to set up a multi-team Scrum environment. Okay, and so you actually generate that sort of material. It's captured as part of the coursework that you're completing. Okay, and then obviously the trainer works with you to assess and give you feedback on how you're coming along with that. Once you've completed that journey and you've amassed that portfolio against those learning objectives, okay, one of the last things that I do is pick something in Scrum, some topic in Scrum, could be at random, okay? My list includes 50 different things. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but includes 50 different things, and you must prepare to teach to the rest of your cohort that subject in Scrum. You'll get feedback back from the remainder of the cohort. You'll go back, inspect and adapt, come back and do it one more time.
Got it. Thank you. And only one sub question, because I added this question: how does a PSM3 holder stand out as a Scrum Master in the job market? So my question is, I have seen multiple Scrum Master working at multiple levels. They don't have any certification. So can someone explain, is it really required, or is it really supportive to become an outstanding Scrum Master? Do they really care about this? Oh, she got PSM3. Let's hire her, or let's consider her application before. Do they really think that way?
You want me to answer that, Mike, or you want to take a crack at that first?
Yeah, I can take a crack first if you'd like. So obviously from the PSM3 angle, I can certainly talk to that. It's hard for me to say because I've never seen one. As in, I've never had a job, a CV come across my desk when I've been hiring for Scrum Masters where someone has even a PSM2 actually. Like all I've ever seen is PSM1s, which again, when you look at those numbers, really isn't that surprising. I can tell you that I would look at a PSM2 or PSM3 and be much more likely to put someone in the let's interview this person pile, for example. But that would not be without looking at their CV, right? I would still have my usual criteria of this is something I want to see and this is something that might exclude them. And probably having a PSM2 or a PSM3 is not going to prevent me from excluding you. Although I think the likelihood of someone who actually goes through that and gets a PSM3, for example, they're less likely to say something that's going to exclude them. So I think you do just, again, it's the knowledge that you gain that's more important than the piece of paper. That said, I do think that there is probably something, and I'm sure that one of the reasons that I probably get interviews more often now is because I write a cover letter for everything that I do that says I am in a very small group of only 1,000 or so people that has the highest level of certification from scrum.org, demonstrating my outstanding mastery of Scrum. you know, it's a bit wanky. It's the sort of thing that I wouldn't say in the real world, but it's a great thing to be able to put on a cover letter. And I'm sure it helps at least a bit. I wouldn't rely on it, but I think it's worthwhile. So I don't know if that answers. And Marcel, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I'll say it this way. Ditto. In part of my cover letter, I do include obviously each one of my trainer credentials, as well as my coaching credentials. But because there is such a small number, I do highlight that, as Mike pointed out, bring it to their attention. I've even heard of folks embed it as part of their actual CV. Okay, rather than highlighting it as a list of credentials, they embed it, okay, in part of their work experience. Another thing that I would say is, as I guess a higher tier certificant, okay, I would encourage all of you to get active and become active if you're not already, and be more active if you are, okay, at putting your name out there. Okay, if you've got a PSM2 and ACSM, okay, start putting it into practice. Join meetup groups, okay, help coach others even outside of your job, and put those things in your CV as well. If you are part of a coaching cohort in a weekend or something, like Saruchi happens to be part of, and you're coaching other people, put that sort of stuff in your CV. Apply what you've acquired knowledge-wise in that credential, okay, and then tout it. Put stuff out there. Take a little bit of a chance. Be a little bit dangerous on LinkedIn is what I'll say.
That sounds a bit familiar. Cool. So that was our time for that. So Hector, sorry, I saw that you had your hand up for a while there and we didn't go to you. Did you get?
Apologize.
All my questions were answered. Thank you very much, both of you.
Brilliant.
Wow, look at that. We're clairvoyant, Mike.
In that case, Nisha, your hand was up as well. Did you have a question or a follow-up?
No, I have exactly the same feedback as Hector. The last thing that Marcelo just said answered my question, so we can move on now.
Awesome. Okay, cool. In that case, I think we basically went through a few questions there, so I'm going to move all of those to done because they all ended up being a bit related. The next one we have there is, how has teaching Scrum classes helped you in your day-to-day application of Scrum with teams? Marcelo, would you like to answer that?
Oh, this is a lovely question. Okay, it helps you keep your knives sharp. Being a trainer, it helps me sharpen my skills, because obviously I'm dealing with a new set of brains that I'm not accustomed to dealing with when I'm actually coaching a team. Okay, and that new sets of brains is a new experience from the universe, helping you hone your skills, which goes back to the question that I was just answering before, which is, so you've got your shiny PSM2, PSM3, CSPSM, go use it, not just at work, go use it. Every time you use it, your tools will become finer honed. You will be more capable the more you use them. Okay. And I would say that, you know, any trainer would probably agree with me on that. Might disagree with me on hundreds of things, but on that one point, they would probably agree with me, is that the more time that they spend working with people that they don't see day to day, helping them connect with the subject matter, okay, helps them hone their own craft. Especially since from class to class, there's always going to be new things that people are encountering, which you may even have encountered, but let's say you haven't seen it in 5 years. And so now you get to go back and refresh it in your brain and say, oh, okay, how did I handle that? Okay, did I even do a good job enough to be able to be helpful to this other person? Okay, and maybe you share how you failed miserably in that other experience, and maybe that failure is actually what ends up helping the other person.
Nice. And just to add to that, Marcelo, I think certainly I believe in the concept of, if you can't teach someone else, you don't understand it. I think that that's the best way to get a really deep knowledge of something, is to teach it. And I would encourage you all to do that if you're not already. And a thing to bear in mind is that is one of the accountabilities of the Scrum Master, right? In the Scrum Guide, I forget the exact wording, but it's something along the lines of you're accountable for the training and implementation of Scrum across the organization, or something. I'm paraphrasing. Marcelo, if you know the language better than I do, you can correct me.
Knowing the language is help the organization develop and plan implementations of Scrum.
There we go. Nice. So training is an element of that, right? It's a skill set that you're expected to have and to develop. Certainly, if you're an organization that has like agile coaches that are responsible for all the training, I would poke at that a little bit and try to get yourself involved in training, because I think teaching others will make you a better practitioner. It'll help you understand the material better. And to Marcelo's point, it gives you insights that you wouldn't get in another setting, because you can talk about things in a theoretical sense, which tends to be less tied to kind of personal ego. It tends to be less tied to judgment. And so it allows you to have conversations that you wouldn't necessarily be able to have in a real team setting. So I think that's something that's really, really valuable. Leading, training, and coaching the organization in its Scrum adoption. Thanks, Sarucci. That was, I think, the line I was looking for. I knew there was something in there that used the word training, but
yeah. Can I say one more thing about that? And if I will, the one more thing about that is that as a trainer, okay, it helps you develop your self-awareness. The fact is that, wow, you put a lot of work to become a trainer. PST, CST, okay, you put a lot of work, okay? You don't want to fall into the trap, okay, of not doubting your own infallibility. In other words, remember to carry around your humble with you. And being able to train people on a day-to-day basis, okay, things will happen to remind you to remain humble if you don't remain humble. And I'll leave it there for your consideration.
Cool. All right. Seems like we're ready to move on then. So the next question we had on there was, what is your last epiphany? Marcelo, would you like to go first on that one?
It's funny that this is being recorded. As it turns out, if anybody's, connected to me on LinkedIn or following me, my last epiphany really is been going on for a little while now. And that is that we as agilists, if you will, need to take back, quote unquote, the marketplace. And the reason I say that is because look at the state of the job market. Okay. We've allowed certain things, and I'm not going to get into the semantics of who and what specifically, but my last epiphany is that basically we as practicants, practitioners, need to take back this job market. It goes back to what I said. You've gotten your PSM2, PSM3, ACSM, CSPSM. Get out there and talk. Get out there and hold each other accountable for some of the ridiculousness out there. Every single day we see phrases like sprint commitment. That wins the I Caramba award for yesterday. Okay. Or that life coaching is agile coaching, which it's not. Okay. So that's my last epiphany, is that we need to get more active and speak out and be a little bit braver at having uncomfortable conversations with each other. Yes, psychological safety is important, but there are ways of putting together an environment to have a psychologically safe yet candid conversation. We're missing a little bit of that candor. Okay. And so I've been doing my level best to try to inject a little bit back in there. There are going to be detractors that say, Marcelo, you're being a little divisive. Marcelo, you're being a little confrontational. Well, you know what? Look at the job market. The numbers are there. We've been a little too wishy-washy. I'll leave it at that.
No, so I strongly agree with all of that, as you already know, Marcelo. I think that's one of the reasons that we're working together. But I think there's an interesting thing in there that actually got triggered for me with a conversation that we had with Ryan. I forget his last name now. Erickson, yeah, Ryan Erickson, who organized the chat with us last week based on something that you kicked off, Marcelo, which was the "There's no such thing as an agile coach" hashtag.
Oh, you had to bring that hashtag up.
But the chat that we had was, agile coaches should, we had a chat about whether agile coaches should be technical software people, which generally I don't think to be true, but I think one of the things that I had an epiphany about in that conversation was that while I don't generally believe that all Agile coaches have to be technical, I think all Agile coaches have to acknowledge that Agile is about software and that we should have knowledge of software. And some of you might have seen my LinkedIn argument that I kicked off on that in the last couple of days, which was my attempt to do exactly what Marcelo was saying. And I would encourage you all to do, because I think it's a good way to learn, which is think about a concept that needs to be talked about, take a position and defend it and talk about it and justify what you think is going on in a given scenario. Be okay with being wrong. I don't happen to think I'm necessarily wrong in that case, but I'm open to the possibility I could be, and I think it's a good chat. But I guess to kind of make the point about having those conversations is that everyone is sick of conversations about, story points or t-shirt sizes or whatever waffle we keep coming back to. I think that most people, and especially most people who are not Agile practitioners, want to hear more substantive conversations about what we do, why we're here, and what we're actually achieving. And I think the more that we get better at talking about those things, the more our perceived value will increase. But sorry, Nisha, you've had a hand up there.
Yeah, so I don't even know where to start with this one, but what I will say in just summary, because I've got so many thoughts on it, is as an Agile coach, I don't know. I need to know, yes, you've got the Agile coaching wheel to try and gain a good view of where your skills should be and where you're lacking, etc., etc. But what we don't have at the moment, and we need to have a better better view of it, is a measurement of where your edge is as an Agile coach. So, for example, are you good at solving systemic issues? Do you go in? Is your whole countenance when you encounter clients and when you work with them just to make teams happy clappy? And is that your takeaway from that, or from all of your training to date? Or are you actually helping them make a business impact? Can you actually interact times up with the exec within a particular organization? Can you build a rapport with them? All of that. And I think one thing I will say is, and what I detect from certain Agile coaches, is they're too scared to say, this is my area of vulnerability. I actually need to sort myself out when it comes to these things. That's why I think there's a lot of varying degrees of experience amongst Agile coaches. There you go. I've said my piece now.
Nice. No, thank you, Nisha. And I agree with a lot of what you said there. So good call. Georgie, sorry, did you want to go? Is that right? Am I saying your name right? Is it Georgie?
Yeah, you can call me Georgie. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just want to end this topic on a single note with all this discussion and everything that's been said so far. I keep getting reminded about one thing, that Scrum was initially focused on being outcome-based, and yet we keep on making it delivery-based. About how many story points we'll deliver, how many features are going to be delivered, and that's an awful understatement of what Scrum is supposed to be. And I believe this discussion reminded me as well.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agree, and thanks for making that point, because and this is something that might come up when we do the activities later, right? Is for me, this is where things like the sprint goal and the product goal become absolutely vital to actually using Scrum properly. Because, like you say, if we're just talking about number of product backlog items we're closing and not what does that achieve and what value does it add, why does it matter? And I think that's something that definitely gets missed a lot. And certainly PSM and ACSM and these higher level things will be looking for your understanding of those things. So nice. And sorry, Marcelo, did you want to go again?
Yeah, I'll finish it up unless there was somebody else ahead of me.
No, I think yours was next hand. Yeah.
Okay, then I will lower my own hand, and basically I'll answer both to what Nisha was saying and both what Hector was saying in the chat. Okay, couple of thoughts on there. Okay. I'm not looking to be right or wrong. That's a moral judgment. Okay. But I'd like to think that I'm correct in my stance on what I've been saying about what Agile coaching is and isn't, and I'll segue into borrowing a statement from Ken, which is yes and. So yes to those things that Tobias is saying, okay, and having worked alongside Tobias many years ago, and reviewed his book when he was writing it, The People's Scrum. I will say yes and to that, with the addition that if we go back and we look at the history of where this phrase agile coach actually came about and where its genesis, okay, which actually has its even further history coming back from TPS, okay, and the TPS coaches, okay. One of the very earliest writings about what an agile coach could be was in a Association of Computing Machinery, ACM, publication on, of all things, XP, Extreme Programming, from 2003, from, of all people, Mary Poppendick, who wrote the seminal book on lean software development. And inside that writing, okay, which I believe Saruchi may have presenced the talk where I quoted it, okay, talks about 3 key things that an agile coach ought to be able to do. And there, she actually mentions the work domain, i.e., the technical domain of what the developers are doing. That doesn't mean that you need to code like you have mad skills, okay? But you must have a functioning understanding of that work domain under which they are operating and what sound practices for operating in that domain look like. What does good coding look like? What does good testing look like? What does good build pipeline look like? What does good regression testing look like? What does good refactoring look like? Okay. Last among the things that she recommended was dealing with the system. Okay. And the people in the system. Okay. Why? Because we had a lot of crappy code. Guess what? That's no different than today. Okay. We haven't cracked that. We still make crummy code today. Okay. So I'll leave that for your consideration. Oh, one last thing. Sorry. Okay. To that end, I've started putting together what I call the Agile Coaching Time Machine, which I hope to publish sometime in the summer, which is going to be a reverse chronological order of where the heck did this phrase Agile Coaching come from in the first place.
Thanks, Marcelo. And yeah, I guess
Sorry it took so long.
No, it's a good answer though, and the only thing I want to add to that, and I think Neve, you've just put a comment in the chat as well that resonates with me, because I don't consider myself particularly technical. It's been a long time since I've done quote unquote technical work, but I think for me, and this is something I said last week in the live stream, I think it's about not making excuses for where the gaps are and being willing to address them when it becomes necessary. So if I'm with a team and their problem is to do with build pipelines, I'm going to spend some time trying to understand build pipelines. Not enough that I can kind of set up a whole CI/CD operation for them, but so that I can be a part of and understand the conversations that they're having. The only bit that frustrates me is when I hear coaches say, "Well, I'm a coach. I don't need to understand that because that's not my thing." And I don't think that's a helpful worldview, right? We don't need to be experts in everything. We don't need to be technically masters of everything. But when there is a need for technical conversation, we should be able to at least be a part of that conversation, is kind of my view. So
yeah. And I think we need domain knowledge, which can be technical if we're working software.
Yeah.
If we're not working software, the domain knowledge is different, but we still need to know where the teams are coming from and how I can help.
Yeah.
But like, it's, yeah. Otherwise, we're just there kind of, okay, great, ask powerful questions, and that's not necessarily how we can help.
Yeah, it's not enough, right? I guess is the way I would frame it. It's not that you can't help, but there are other ways that you should also help. So, yeah.
Neve wins the beer, Mike.
What's that? Sorry.
Neve wins the beer.
Yeah.
In any webinar, when somebody drops a mic, in my eyes anyway, when they drop the mic, they win a beer. She just dropped the mic. She wins the beer.
There you go. You contact Marcelo to get a beer sent in the mail or something. I don't know.
We'll figure it out.
Love it. Sweet. All right. So next question we have, any book recommendations? And I'm guessing this is in the context of getting better at Scrum, not what's your favorite Lord of the Rings book, but book recommendations.
Sure. First of all, I need to get sorted out when I'm going to get my royalties for pimping out his book. But Martin Dahlman's, writing Sprint Goals book, he owes me some back royalty for pimping him out as much as I have. Okay, there you go. You see, Neve? You see? He keeps telling me my check is in the mail. If you're listening, Martin, I'm waiting. It doesn't take that long for the mail to get here. So anyways, that's one very good book. Another book, which I happen to, wow, how convenient, right? Is understand as a PSM3, as a CSPSM, you need to be navigating the politics of the environment. This book by my buddy Peter Wendroff, Politics and Software Development. Read it, borrow shamelessly from it, okay? Think of scenarios where a Scrum Master may need to coach and facilitate situations that involve politics of the organization, okay? I guarantee you that politics in the organization hit all three centers of what a Scrum Master's scope of influence should be. Service to the team, service to the product owner, and service to the organization. Lovely book.
Nice. Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I haven't read that one that you mentioned, but I love it. Sounds great, and I'm going to check that out. Definitely agree with Martin's book. So Driving Value with Sprint Goals. I think that's one of the best books that I've read in the last few years because it's just so insightful and focuses on the right things. Go ahead.
One more. Leadership and Product Development by Ebenezer Ikone. Leadership and Product Development by Ebenezer Ikone. He is an organizational coach and product manager at Cox Automotive here in Atlanta. Ebenezer, if you're listening, I'm still waiting for my check too.
Nice. Cool. I'm not sure what other ones I would recommend. So particularly for preparing for exam type stuff, the main thing that I would recommend that hasn't been mentioned is Simon Reinl and Stephanie Ockerman's Mastering Professional Scrum, which is very, very good. And it's Scrum series. The Zombie Scrum Survival Guide as well. Barry Overeem. Did Barry and Christian write that one together? Or is that just
yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic, and I have a soft spot for it because it very much aligns with my way of thinking with dysfunction mapping and stuff as well. Also, Stefan Volper's new Scrum Anti-Patterns Guide. I haven't actually finished that yet, but I love what I've read of it so far. And again, very useful view because it's not just here's what good looks like, it's here's what bad looks like, and here's what you can do about it. So I think there's some really useful stuff in there.
So, Michael, I have both the books that suggested by you, Stephanie and Stephen. One book I would like to suggest is Scrum Mastery by Jeff Watts.
Yeah.
I know it talks more about characteristics of Scrum Master. I was able to complete that book entirely. It is amazing. I mean, it takes you a little bit beyond certifications. Like the behavioral skills and characteristics, you need to be tactful, empathetic, little bit nurturing, resourceful. It gives you different flavor of working ways with the team. So I liked it. Of course, certifications give you different level of understanding, but that takes you beyond understanding, I think. So I would put the link in the chat.
Nice. Appreciate it, Ruchi. I guess on that note, does anyone else have any book recommendations we haven't had yet? Yeah, go on, Ivan.
Yeah, I'm struggling with Zoom a little bit, so I have to raise my physical hand. But something I've been using is a little bit different, but it's more of like a working book that we're using right now with a couple of Scrum Masters. It's a first version of the book, so you can tell from time to time, but already has a lot of interesting parts in there. That it basically consists of 52 different topics that you can go over, a checklist to check, and gives you a little bit of structure. And also, as you go over your solutions, it gives you a little bit of a insight what kind of solutions you had or what they did.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't seen that one, but that sounds really cool. I have been playing with that as an idea myself, actually, because I think more like workbook type stuff would actually be really handy, right? Because it's a bit more practical day to day rather than just I'm going to sit for 4 hours and read this book. You know? Yeah. Appreciate the recommendation. Thank you. Any other thoughts or book recommendations? In that case, we're down to the last question, and this is actually going to lead very, very perfectly into the topic we're going to be doing for the activity for the next couple of hours. So before I get to my response, I guess I'll throw that to Marcelo as well, is do you have any thoughts on ways of developing your own practice questions for PSM3 or just more generally for understanding Scrum?
Well, I would go back and look at your past retrospectives to start. Number one, go back and look at your past retrospectives. Okay. There was a song from the 1990s, things that make you go, Find the things that make you go, inside of those retrospectives. Okay. Compile a list of those things that make you go, whether the team decided to discuss the topic or not. If the team decided to discuss the topic, fine, but set that in a different pile. But especially the things that the team didn't really pay that much attention to, okay? And look at that pile, and going forward in time from however far back you go in your retrospective, start seeing if there were recurring instances of that same subject or related subject, okay, and develop a history for either how they ignored it, okay, or how they started addressing it, and look for yourself to examine what that journey was like, okay, especially if it's been a long, long time ago. Yeah, our memories are going to be a little bit fuzzy. So what I guess I could say is start developing that habit from today. Okay. And of course, if you would so choose, you could always bring that to a dysfunction mapping class. Just saying. And then you could put that in practice.
Nice. Yeah, thanks for that plug, because that's kind of what I was going to get at, right? I'm sure some of you already know this, but dysfunction mapping is obviously a really good way to think through turning problems into solutions, which I think is kind of what we've been practicing in this session and what we will practice this afternoon as well, or this evening, depending where you are. This probably leads in then to the next bit. So what I might do is I'll do a quick chat about, because it's related to this question, about the symptom cards, but then we'll come back and just see if there's any last questions, and then we'll jump into the actual activities and the kind of the flow of the day. Marcelo, it's entirely up to you whether you would like to stay and be a part of the next couple of hours or whether you have to dash. I will put you on the spot. I'll let you think about that and decide what you want to do as I talk about the next stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm totally cool to hang with you guys. You guys have been a lovely bunch, and I confess that any opportunity to practice dysfunction mapping is good for me. I've got a few hours before I've got to go rush somewhere, so I'm good to hang if you're good to have me.
Cool. I certainly would love to have you here. So yeah, thank you for being here. Sweet. So on that note, then, just on that last question, like I say, coming up with your own questions, PSM3 or similar exam style practice. One of the things that we've been doing in the previous sessions, obviously, is using dysfunction mapping to take a practice question and then work backwards to say, right, given this situation, where in Scrum is the dysfunction? What Scrum values or pillars of empiricism might I use to solve the problem? What action would I take? Right. That's kind of what we've been doing in previous sessions. For those of you who are new, don't worry, we'll run through that again in a sec. But the thing that I've hinted at a bunch of times is that eventually I want to get to a point where I'm not just writing questions and giving them to you as a group, that you can actually generate your own questions. And the thing that I've created to help facilitate that is these Scrum symptom cards, which you can see up on the top here. So there's almost 150 of these Scrum symptom cards, which are just examples of problems that I've seen, that I've heard about in teams, that are that feel like a good jumping off point for this question, right? Which is, how might I create a theoretical problem to solve, right? So that I can practice that problem solving mindset. These are not exhaustive, just the ideas that I came up with. You are more than welcome to create and add your own, to use these or to not use these to your heart's content. What these do offer, though, is an ability to basically just select a few things almost at random, but maybe that seem a bit related, and then use them to form your own little question. And today we're going to do an example of that so that you kind of get an idea of what I mean. And so you can see that this set of cards is all together, but you can see some blank spaces, which is where I've drawn some cards from, and I've put them together down here into this little area. And they're just things that seem like they could reasonably be related to me. So team is constantly working overtime. There's high turnover. Plans are unrealistic. Product owner isn't a part of the team. The team doesn't feel like they can be honest about what's hard, and time estimations are taken as fixed. Basically taken at random, but somewhat related-ish. And then what I've done is I've tried to turn that into a question, and I'll bring us over here to quickly show you what I mean by that. And then in a minute, I'll stop sharing and we can just play with it ourselves. Take those symptoms and try to write a question for yourself based on the stuff that you've written there. And so what I've done is said, you're now the Scrum Master for a team that is crunching to achieve a release deadline that was set by the product owner a year earlier. 2 people recently quit and morale is low. What steps will you take? How will you support proper Scrum practice and the health of the team? So that's just me trying to summarize in a questioning sort of way how you might answer, how you might frame this as a problem to solve. You might not even care about doing this bit because maybe you don't even need this explicit thing. Maybe just using the cards and saying, right, these are the problems. How do I think this through and write an action plan of something I might do? Entirely up to you, because again, what I cannot do is tell you exactly the questions and exactly the format that you're going to get in a given exam. I can't prepare you in that way. What we're trying to do here is practice that deep thinking and, creation of action that comes when you think about these things in a really robust way. And that's what we want you to get better at, right? Understand Scrum, solve problems more easily. So we're going to do that all in a sec. I guess on that note, I'll get into the flow of the day. Are there any final kind of questions or thoughts for myself or Marcelo before we kind of kick into the activity stuff?
I'm good. Let's go.